Welcome. I'm Jonathan Hudson, and this is Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington, D.C. And in today's edition, we're going to focus our discussion on the situation in the Gaza Strip, Israel's intentions leading to a high-intensity conflict within the context of a decision by the Security Cabinet here in Jerusalem. Yemen launched a ballistic missile towards the international airport here in Israel, Ben Gurion, while CENTCOM is continuing to degrade this Iranian proxy. What does that all mean for us today? And last but not least, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the various complexities at hand related to that. But before our discussion, of course, I'll introduce our panelist for today. From left to right is Mr. Marshall Billingsley, who is a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, formerly an assistant secretary general of NATO, as well as a U.S. assistant secretary of the Treasury for countering terror financing. Next to him is Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, who formerly served as Israel's Director General of the Ministry for Strategic Affairs, as well as the head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, and currently, of course, the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And next to him, last but not least, is retired Major John Spencer, who is the chair of the Urban Warfare Studies at the War Institute at West Point. It's great to see all three of you. And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Billingsley. As I mentioned, the Security Cabinet here in Jerusalem has made a decision, unanimously agreed upon the war plans moving forward vis-a-vis the Islamist Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It plans to gradually intensify the warfare. The codename for this looming operation, Gideon's Chariots, very biblical in essence, but nonetheless, what can you tell us about what is to be expected in the near future?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jonathan. I think it's clear that the negotiated ceasefire and all of the other hostage arrangements have broken down. And this really is the main course of action that is left to the government, is to go in and hopefully fully decapitate what's remaining of the Hamas leadership. It's also my hope that that President Trump will respond favorably if the Israeli government asks for direct support from our special operations forces. That was something that they did ask of the Biden administration, and it was denied. But let's recall that Hamas is a terror organization that has killed quite a few Americans, and we have a vested interest in seeing Israel succeed.
Absolutely. 33 American nationals were killed on October 7th. Over a dozen were taken hostage, and one of them, who still remains alive, is in Hamas captivity to date, something that, of course, demands from the United States to act accordingly. But nonetheless, General Kuperwasser, when we're looking at the complexities at hand, what should one observing the ongoing conflict for the past 16, 17 months now take into account?
Well, I think that what needs to be in the center of our attention is the connection between the beginning of this new initiative, new campaign, and the issue of the hostages, because the decision is not to really take over the entire Gaza Strip as only the last stage of this campaign. The idea is in the first stage to gather the forces, to train them, to make them ready, hoping that this is going to have some impact on Hamas. If they're going to avoid the major attack, they still have time to change their mind. Second stage is you start operations, still limited in scale, taking several positions that were not taken beforehand in this second round of operations, and hoping that Hamas would understand that now we are getting very closely to the last stage of taking over the entire Gaza Strip, and still they have a chance to rescue themselves by accepting a partial deal for releasing some of the hostages and having some sort of short period of time ceasefire. That's the second stage. And only in the third stage, if all of this doesn't work, and most probably it's not going to work, then we are going to see the taking over of the entire Gaza Strip, stripping Hamas from its capabilities, both military and governing capabilities, and installing some sort of civil administration led by the military and using all kinds of other forces to deliver the humanitarian aid to the population, hoping that by that we shall force actually Hamas to reach an agreement that would release the hostages, or that we shall be able to release them by force.
Major Spencer, when we're talking about releasing them by force, the complexities of the Gaza environment are naturally one that demand a lot of planning. At the same time, force protection is going to become harder and harder as time progresses. What should the IDF take into account engaging in this new round of higher intensity fighting, of course, gradually in the implementation phases?
I mean, the devil's always in the details. Of course, in order to do hostage rescue by force, it requires an immense amount of intelligence. You have to interact with the environment to achieve that. And I agree with any amount of support that can be given to intensify that intelligence collection. But I think really for this round of plans is signaling to everyone that it's not the old plan. This is a new plan. This is the IDF acknowledging and signaling to Hamas and giving them options that this won't be like before. This won't be very targeted raids in and out. This is to actually hold ground, clear portions methodically, piece by piece of Gaza, and then hold them. But it involves, again, the temporary evacuation of civilians, which does open up opportunities for further intelligence collection. But I hope that everybody understands how this plan is very different than what's been implemented before, both from the leadership down to the tactics, even the infamous clear, hold, and build. What it sounds like in that final third stage is actually the Israel and the IDF saying that they're willing to enter that build phase, which is install a different government into Gaza.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Billingsley, while this warfare is taking place, naturally, there's still a lot of civilians in the Gaza Strip. The non-combatant population there has been experiencing different challenges, one of which, of course, ended up being that the influx of humanitarian aid ended up going into the wrong hands, namely that of the Islamist Hamas, which exploited the aid for its own purposes. Therefore, under the Fourth Geneva Convention on Article 23, Israel was not obliged under international law to provide the income of humanitarian aid, but nonetheless, having the suffering at the stages that is quite evident, escalating as we speak, is something that the Israeli government and military are taking into account. And how can basically Israel now maneuver within this complexity at a time when we also hear U.S. President Donald Trump coming out and saying, look, I am applying pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to resolve this issue?
Certainly, the plight of the Palestinians is noteworthy, and I think the government of Israel deserves a great deal of credit with how they've handled both the application of force in a very judicious manner, with really, given that environment, how few casualties were actually inflicted on the civilian population when you compare, for instance, with some of our experiences fighting in Iraq. But it's clear that the terror organization is maintaining a monopoly of violence over the civilians there, and is using the incoming food aid to extort and to profit. There's also this highly curious matter of the Gaza flotilla vessel that is moored offshore of Malta, where they are refusing to allow the Maltese on board to inspect. So that bears watching too. At the end of the day, the local population does appear to be pretty disaffected with Hamas. There's been quite a few protests and outbreaks. Hamas is engaged in summary executions of some of local Palestinian leadership. So there is an unhappy population in Gaza, and that will be to the IDF's benefit if they successfully cultivate those relationships when they move in.
General Kupelwasser, to what degree is the Israeli government currently under pressure from the surrounding countries with regard to the complexities related to the Gaza Strip? And is there some sort of coordination or collaboration in dealing with the current environment at hand?
Well, there is some pressure from the Egyptians and the Qataris to show more flexibility and readiness to go and accept some of Hamas expectations and positions, but I don't think this is really powerful enough in order to change the government's position. And there is pressure from inside Israel, from the families of the hostages and from other elements within the Israeli public that want to see an end to the war, and they're ready to accept the Hamas conditions. But the government is dealing with that and ignores these tensions, these pressures, and make sure that it's the only option they see for releasing the hostages is through putting more military pressure on Hamas. And in their mind, to some extent, they are right. The former deals that led to the release of hostages were achievable because of the pressure, military pressure. So it's they want to prove that more pressure now is going to be fruitful, and it's all about how much pressure you apply. And in the beginning, it's easier. With less pressure, you can get some results. When it gets to the final stages, you need more pressure. And, that's what the government is trying to do. On top of that, there is this coming visit of President Trump to the region, in which he's going to visit Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. And this is also playing a role here. So I think that Israel is not going to start the operation itself before President Trump is out of the region, and this kind of issue is behind us.
Senior security official, as was put to us in the statement released with the briefing from that official, did mention that the high intensity conflict will ensue immediately following the departure of President Trump from the region. And on that, I'd like to ask you, Major Spencer, when we were really looking at the complexities of the Gaza Strip. I mean, the war environment there is not necessarily similar to previous cases when we're talking about the Gaza Strip, but nonetheless, as Mr. Billingsley mentioned, there's a lot of frustration amongst the civilian population there, and the clan construct of the Gaza Strip had various events in the past where we saw the various clans challenging Hamas. Do you see something like this reoccurring, and could that be potentially also exploited for the purpose of further depriving Hamas from operational achievements?
Absolutely. That will be a part of that, especially that final stages. It just has to be. And it's the messy, complicated, hard thing to do. But it is the ultimate path to victory, is that Hamas not only is defeated, but it never regains power. So identifying those elements within the population that can become the new power, whether it's a clan-based system or some other system. But Hamas's power was never weakened enough to where anything else could survive, although the protests have been very significant, that the protests have been able to be had, although there are still attribution on protest leaders and activists within Gaza. But absolutely, those clan-based different power structures in different parts of Gaza can be heavily relied on. And this is a lot of the lessons learned once you enter that phase, although many analysts have tried to push Gaza into that counterinsurgency, counterterrorism phase when we're still in the war phase of destroying the power that is the power in Gaza right now.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Billingsley, let's shift gears to the Yemeni issue. We're talking, of course, about the Iranian proxy called Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen. Yesterday, they launched a ballistic missile, towards Israel's international airport, Ben Gurion, for reasons that the Israel air and missile defense provided following an initial investigation, the interceptor of the Arrow 3 had some type of technical malfunction, and therefore it managed to penetrate Israeli airspace. There were also reports about a THAAD missile being launched, but we couldn't necessarily corroborate that since CENTCOM does not provide those type of details in operational settings, and therefore we cannot do so. But nonetheless, looking at this strike, we saw plenty of international carriers cancel their retours from Israel and back. We hear the spokesman of Ansar Allah coming out and declaring that the international carriers should never do business with Israel again, since they plan on continuing to launch those ballistic missiles towards Israeli territory. Thankfully, the Israeli air and missile defense capabilities have showcased 95% success, but when we're talking about the ongoing efforts to confront this issue, what can be done?
Well, the fact that the missile penetrated successfully is just it's just a tragedy. I know that lives were lost, children among them. No missile defense is fail-safe or foolproof. That's why in the United States and in Israel, we are fielding layered defenses to give you as many chances to defeat the incoming threat as possible. But at the end of the day, I promise you, the Houthis did not manufacture that missile. They did not make that missile in Yemen. That missile was given to them by their Iranian masters. And both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have made clear that Iran is going to face consequences for this attack and any further attacks. So stay tuned on that front.
General Cooper-Vassel, your take on that?
Well, first of all, I fully agree with what Marshall was saying. And it's not only the Houthis in Yemen, it's the Iranians that stand behind them that are the culprits in this attack. And technically, yes, we always say that the chances of a missile to break through the air defense and missile defense systems is a positive number. It's 5%, 10%, something like that. So if occasionally those missiles that manages to do that penetrate in, it's to be expected. And all kinds of malfunctioning of the system, of our system, once in a while, and this enables the missiles to reach the incoming missiles to reach the target. And what needs to happen now is to make clear to both the Houthis and the Iranians that they made a mistake by hitting the Israeli airport, and that the price is going to be heavy. And we are charging the Americans mainly, are charging the Yemenite Houthis with a heavy price on a constant basis for months now. So I guess we are going to join in and do something ourselves just to make sure that they know that we are not closing our eyes when something like that happens. And I would expect an Israeli response, both against in some more sophisticated way against the Iranians.
Absolutely. Just to point out, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as Marshall mentioned earlier, did repost a tweet by President Donald Trump, which was posted on the 17th of March, during the course of which President Trump, quite frankly, stated that any attack emanating from Yemen by the Houthis will be regarded as an attack by the Iranians. He didn't necessarily follow through on this threat as of yet. Nevertheless, the consequences will undoubtedly come. Major Spencer, when we're talking about the efforts right now by NAVCENT, the naval component of CENTCOM, as well as Central Command, and now also in close cooperation with the United Kingdom, to degrade the Houthis with 11 sorties just overnight, targeting multiple targets in Yemen and eliminating, among others, leaders of the Houthi tribe, as well as Ansar Allah, the broader complex of various tribal factions operating under the Iranian directives. Do you see this air naval campaign being potent enough at this stage? And to what degree are we to expect a certain collaboration with the local opposition forces to the Houthis in Yemen to really push back on this Iranian terror group from that ultimately was or emanated out of the Saada governorate, which is merely a small governorate in the northwestern part of Yemen?
Yeah, it's a really hard questions where people want black and white answers. To answer frankly, clearly it hasn't deterred the Houthis from attacking Israel and other U.S. forces and international shipping. And the United States military through CENTCOM and NAVCENT have done over 1,000 strikes. And it still hasn't deterred. That doesn't mean that that course of action can't work. And I think that we may see it be expanded on targets, but from the local environment, which is really complex and has been going on for years, and the real humanitarian crisis going on in Yemen is always being weighed against the options against the Houthis themselves, and years of foreign policy insanity of trying the same thing and allowing Iran to arm the Houthis with this arsenal that rivals most nations from shore to sea capabilities. That is a problem that had to be dealt with. But I think as we were discussing, that you'll see an expanded operation possibly involving Israel forces to broaden the target list, to further try to deter at this moment, because dealing with Iran while you're also trying to negotiate the dismantling of their nuclear program is complex.
Absolutely. Naturally, as Sun Tzu, the Chinese war philosopher, always said, war is the art of deception. I'm sure that Israel has a couple of deceptive moves up its sleeve, but we don't have very much time left, and I'd like to have each of you close with 1 minute and 20 seconds each, not more than that. Mr. Billingsley, if we may focus on Iran, there were also a long list of new sanctions imposed on the terror regime in Tehran. What can you tell us about that?
So the maximum economic pressure campaign that I was part of in the first Trump administration is being reapplied to the Iranian regime, but now under some pretty dramatically changed circumstances. When we left office, Iran had no highly enriched uranium, none. They now have nearly a metric ton. They are within 1 week of being able to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear device if they choose, and they can produce perhaps 7 weapons within 3 weeks. So that is a fundamentally changed circumstance, which means that any negotiations with the Iranians on dismantling their nuclear program will be time bound. President Trump has given 60 days. We've probably got 45 left at this stage. And I strongly suspect that there will be military action in the offing if the Iranians fail to show up at the table.
General Kupelwasser?
I agree that the main issue right now is the negotiations about the Iranian nuclear project. And following the contradicting messages we hear from Washington, we have to understand what is at stake. I think that following what President Trump said yesterday, that Iran should not have the capability to enrich uranium, that is the most important issue. The Iranians insist on having the capability to enrich uranium. They don't need this capability for anything else but having the capability to move towards having a nuclear weapon. And that's why it's so important to prevent them from having this capability. I think the administration understands it, and now the two sides fight for their position. We'll see who is stronger. I think that on the one hand, we know how dangerous Iran is and how close they are to having the capability to produce a nuclear weapon and have fissile material. And on the other hand, we know how vulnerable they are, how weak they are, and we know that there is a credible military option, and they know that there is a credible military option. And all of that is going to affect the way the negotiations are going to develop. The Iranians are going to play for time, but I think that the administration understands that too. So I'm not sure they're going to fall into this trap.
If I may quote Sun Tzu twice in one panel, which usually doesn't happen, is when you're weak, appear strong. And that is something that the Iranians have been working very hard to achieve. Major Spencer, your take?
Well, On that part about trying to appear strong, I mean, Israel proved that the Islamic regime in Iran's air defenses probably shouldn't have come from Russia and that they are weak in that capability, and it factors into, possible options. But of course, you try all diplomacy, but I agree with Marshall and other that the time base is a really big part of this, as Iran will try to negotiate and then set some 5 year from now, program or checklist of not doing something. But I agree with President Trump and really the rest of the world is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It is not just a threat to Israel, it's a threat to the entire world.
Absolutely. Well, with 30 seconds remaining, Mr. Billingsley, the Iranians also have a proactive and are very quickly progressing in developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are focused specifically on deterring the United States. Is this something that has to be part of any deal, whatever it may be ultimately?
Yes, countries don't build those kinds of missiles unless they want to put a nuclear warhead on them. Unfortunately, under the Biden administration, they took all the restrictions off Iran's ballistic missile program at the UN. So that will have to be part of the negotiations. So too will have to be a renunciation of Iran's support for terrorist organizations, because when Obama let them off the hook with their nuclear program, he sent them pallets of cash, and the first thing they did is spanned that money out among the Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi type terror network that Iran sustains.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall Billingsley, Brigadier General Yossi Cooperwasser, and Major John Spencer for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition of Hudson Institute's Deep Dive from Jerusalem and Washington, D.C., wishing you a pleasant day.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.